All right, so I try to do these stories as like I think of themselves in my own head and like the nonsensical conversations I have with myself throughout the day. And they sound much better there. But this one, it's not really my story to tell. All right, so to back up a bit, my dad's biological dad, father, died when he was an infant. And so the way hunting came to me was through my great uncles, Hank and Paul, who more or less raised my dad or were the father figure for my dad in the early 50s, mid 50s. So we're talking like mid 50s here. Hank and Paul were brothers, small town, middle of nowhere, western Midwest. In World War II, Hank and Paul were both sent to the Pacific in World War II as part of the Army. Paul came down with a severe case of malaria, which affected him for the rest of his life. He died before I was born with recurring malaria and was just never the same. Hank saw probably too much combat. What they referred to it back then in that era was shell shock. And so Hank was a little different, and Hank died when I was 7, 8, or 9 years old. The last time I remember going to Hank's was like sitting on his shag carpet rug in his living room. So I have a few stories about Hank, from that era and the people who knew him. One, he was jumpy. If you fired, if you shot a bird or whatever, and he wasn't expecting it, you could just expect to see him in the dirt. Another one, so backing up a little again, Hank always shot a bolt action 12 gauge. Modern era, I know it seems kind of crazy that there would be a such thing as a bolt action 12 gauge, but there was, and Hank always shot one. My dad got a hand-me-down shotgun. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think like a Remington Model 8, an old pump, like an old crappy pump, and he was so small that he had to put it down between his feet and chuck it or rack it that way. Put it on the ground to pump the shotgun was the hand-me-down shotgun he got when he was a boy. And back then there was a lot more pheasants. Even when I was a kid, there was way more pheasants than there is now, because another story for another video, but just the things weren't farmed to the extent that they're farmed now. There was more ditches, there was, crop edges, there was more cover. A lot more pheasants back then, and as an adolescent, it seems like sooner or later the shooting will click with you. Well, when it wasn't clicking with my dad, he asked Hank, the Guadalcanal veteran, how he shot pheasants so well. And Hank said, well, they all got slant eyes. Just, kind of those things. The type of people back then and their things. All right, so one more story about Hank. How this relates to me too, like I explained earlier, is if Hank hadn't taught my dad the things that he taught my dad never would have taught me the things I knew or come to know growing up. And I'm still learning. I'm like middle-aged now, and I'm still learning these things. So this was later in Hank's life. This is like early 90s or whatever. And Hank needs a new TV. His TV's on the fritz. So his son Doug, dead now. I don't necessarily feel so terrible about telling these stories because everybody in them is dead. Anyway, so they're gonna go get Hank a new TV. So they drive the 2 hours down to the appliance store, which some of you kids may not remember, when you couldn't just buy the TV at Walmart because Walmart wasn't the thing it is now. Back then, you went to the appliance store for your shopping. So anyway, they get Hank to the appliance store, and they're looking at TVs or whatever, and they find a TV. The salesman's there. They find a TV that they like. Okay, so on and so forth. Hank looks down at the brand and says, Toshiba. That looks like a Jap name. Salesman says, well, yeah, it is. And so Hank died with an RCA in his living room.